So, thank you very much for agreeing to this interview. I'm very excited about this.
Yeah, me too. I'm so happy to be here. Yeah, thank you.
I think it is so important to talk about what we're gonna talk about in this video because we see this huge push towards plant-based diets, towards veganism, towards vegetarian diets, and everyone is telling us how healthy they are. And so in New York they introduced, I think, the meatless Mondays, and in Oakland, in USA, they have also, I think, meatless Mondays where you're supposed to eat only vegetarian stuff. And so there's it seems to be like a lot of like this movement towards making it all plant-based, and yet at the same time we see that people who have been vegan for years or even decades, that they're jumping ship in huge numbers, and we see those ex-vegan videos exploding on YouTube, right? Where like people who have been vegan for 5 or 12 or 20 years abandoning it and telling that this nearly killed them and how bad it was for their health. And so your experience is similar, right?
Yeah, it's similar, and it's so interesting because, of course, now I'm at the end of that too, and I've jumped ship now. It's been nearly 5 years, and within that time, the vegan movement and the vegan message has just grown so much, and I find it so disheartening for me too, because I just see so many young people like I was 13 when I went vegan.
Wow.
Just get into it in this just kind of dogmatic kind of state where you just accept everything that's given, because it does sound so wonderful. It sounds like everything can be, solved, and the world's issues can be solved, and we are dealing with really big issues with the environment and chronic disease epidemic, and animals are being mistreated. So it just seems like this obvious solution to go vegan, but I think it's just the consequences of that long term are just so not considered.
Right.
And we can see that now, because I think it was a movement, when I got into it, it wasn't so big, and the people who I got into it with have either also changed, have been forced to change because of health,
right,
or the ones who haven't aren't in a great shape, so to do with their health, and I think, it's not a great solution. And once you look past the kind of partial truths that the vegan message puts forth, you can really see a more nuanced picture that isn't put forth when you look at the larger picture.
Right. So, okay, did I catch this correctly? So you're no more. So you stopped being vegan 5 years ago. Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. And when you were vegan, how long were you vegan?
Yeah, so I was strict vegan for nearly 8 years. And when I say strict, it didn't even cross my mind to even eat an egg or anything like that. I was completely 100% ethically devoted to being vegan, and also I thought it was the best way for my health. I just thought it was the optimal diet, and anything outside of veganism was going to be detrimental. So I was fully committed during those 7 years, and we can talk a bit about, if you want, because I went through various stages of veganism, and I started when I was 13, and I quickly got into raw veganism.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how much you know about the movement, but there's this framework put forth by Doug Graham, which is all about 80-10-10. So that's 80% carbohydrates, 10% fat, 10% protein. That's kind of the macronutrient ratios that they give, so the opposite of keto, basically. And of course, all plant-based, based on fruit. And then within that community, there's the two kind of celebrities of Freely, the Banana Girl, and Durian Rider. And at that age, I think I was just so sucked into the whole narrative of raw vegan, and having the whole community there. There was a forum called 30 Bananas a Day that I was a part of. And the issue is that it was just like a whole echo chamber. So all of the existing beliefs just got perpetuated and not questioned or challenged. So whenever you would see people pose a question with their own health challenges, the only solutions were already within the framework. Or it was the kind of, you're doing it wrong, and it was never the fault of the diet. So that's how it just continued. And so I was raw vegan from 14 to 19.
Mm-hmm. And why did you stop being raw vegan and then you switched to cooked vegan? Yes,
I switched to cooked vegan very briefly, and that was really when that I reached a kind of physiological tipping point, because all of my issues didn't happen overnight, and it takes years for severe deficiencies to build up. And during that time, on that time period, I just normalized feeling like crap. I normalized waking up without any energy. I normalized waking up with joint pain, and it reached a point where I was then diagnosed with Graves' disease. So in 2013, which is an autoimmune condition of the thyroid. And that really made me wake up. Up until then, I had many red flags, including blood tests that showed severe deficiencies in things like zinc, iodine, iron, ferritin, B12, even though I was taking supplements. I was taking methylcobalamin, so obviously I wasn't absorbing what I was taking. And I think also because of the low fat within the 8-10-10 framework, I wasn't absorbing either any of the beta carotene, and I wasn't converting those plant nutrients to the active form. So, for example, carotene to retinol. And so I had like this yellow tint to my skin because I just wasn't absorbing these nutrients. And so that tipping point really forced me to reevaluate. And at first I just wanted to stay vegan, so I added things like cooked quinoa and potatoes, more just like starches, and then supplements and greens. I really went heavy on the greens and the nutrient dense foods with like algae and seaweed, and it just didn't work. I even got sicker. I couldn't tolerate grains at all, and I think by that time, because I had leaky gut, so like increased intestinal permeability, all of the lectins. I mean, that's the thing with the vegan foods, they're just so lectin rich and so rich in anti-nutrients. And for someone with gut issues and GI issues, the immunological response for me just caused such pain and inflammation. So I quickly had to change, because I remember once eating a bowl of quinoa for lunch, and I had to ring. I was doing an internship for my university, and I couldn't go. I was just every day I was just sicker and sicker. So that was the cooked vegan.
Right. So the algae. So I think this is often suggested to vegans who turn out to be iron deficient, right? They're told to just eat more algae, and that that will fix the iron deficiency, right?
Yeah, and also B12.
B12 it's also supposed to. Okay, wow.
Yeah, except of course it's an analog, so and that's almost even more dangerous, because then on the blood test it can show up that you're within normal range, but it doesn't mean you have functional levels of B12, so you can still present with neurological issues. And I mean, when I got my blood test results before I was diagnosed with Graves' disease, my triglycerides and my homocysteine was in stroke range. And I was not eating, I was eating 100% raw vegan. So I wasn't eating cholesterol. So it's not like they say in the vegan narrative that it's cholesterol that increases blood cholesterol, which of course we know is not the case. And,
right.
our own biochemistry is just so much more complex than that.
Right.
And just that huge amount of sugar, but just the absence of nutrient-dense foods. Because my teeth, so I started getting severe teeth issues. There was a day where I was just eating some fruit and my front tooth just chipped.
Okay,
and,
was it because you was it because there was a pit in the fruit and that you? No, it was just on the soft flesh of the fruit. Your tooth chipped off.
I was just eating. I think it might have been like an apple or something, or a pear, which can be a bit more tough. But yeah. I mean, teeth generally shouldn't chip if you're eating an apple.
Right.
And that wasn't the first time. I had also had teeth chip off at the back too, but that one was the most visible. And so I went to the dentist, and the dentist he was just flabbergasted. He looked at my enamel, which was just completely worn down, and he asked me if I was drinking like sugar for breakfast, because he had never seen that. He had actually never seen someone with such severe, I needed like tons of fillings in my teeth, and I had to get a root canal also for my front tooth. And all of these things don't happen overnight, but I was just ignoring them because in my mind I was eating the optimal diet. And looking back, of course, I can see in what a state I was, but I can also reach out to others because I'm not the only one. Like we can see on YouTube, I mean, some vegan promoters, you can tell they don't look healthy, right. But in their head, they are the most healthy they can be. So there's this psychological aspect with veganism, which I think is really special. It's not just the physiological, it's really the psychological that takes over, just being in this like vegan bubble and this ideology. Yeah,
it really stumps me because and to believe that, because some people they call the plant-based diet an all-natural diet, and like literally when you look at the dietary evolution of humankind, there's actually not a single example where a native tribe or some people who like live in the jungle and in harmony with nature where they don't eat meat. Like this has never existed in human history. Like this is virtually the most unnatural way of eating, right? And yet they promote it as natural way of eating. So it's stunning.
And I mean, I think that's the lure, right? Because it's like this Garden of Eden kind of image that is put forth.
Right.
That it's just so natural and that we're frugivores. I know like in the raw vegan community, that's really one of their main premises is that humans are frugivores, not carnivores or omnivores. And so we're meant to base our diet on fruit. Right. And like you said, the irony is that, I mean, even broccoli is man-made. I mean, all of the vegetables that we consider to be the most natural nutrient-dense foods are man-made, they're hybrid. I mean, broccoli was only introduced about 1,000 years ago, and in the terms of human evolution, that's like a blink of an eye.
Right.
These are completely modern foods.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. Yeah. So, okay. So, was the diagnosis of Graves' disease, was this the wake-up call for you?
Yeah. So that was in 2013. I also got diagnosed with PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome, and I think that was due to the insulin resistance that I developed on the raw vegan diet. And from that point, it really opened my eyes. I told myself, I mean, even with all the blood tests and that diagnosis, if I had continued down that path, it wasn't going to be pretty. And because I was already in the kind of alternative space, I didn't want to take medication. So that was really the other factor that played into looking at animal foods, because if I was going to change my health and restore my health and not take medication, I knew I needed to change something, and that something was going to be my diet. And the only thing I hadn't changed or tried to change was introducing animal foods. So that's the point that I introduced eggs and sardines and scallops. Those were like my safe foods because it wasn't an animal or red meat or something like that. So it wasn't like from one day to the next either, because there was really a psychological blockage for me. It was really tough to transition from being an ethical vegan to just changing everything and thinking that, okay, maybe I actually need animal products for my health. So I kind of just like stepped into it.
So how long did it take you from the diagnosis to starting eating animal products again? Was it like, okay, once you understood it, you were like, okay, I gotta do it, and you went straight to the supermarket and get some food, or was it still some, weeks or months until you were ready to eat some meat?
It was within a few weeks, definitely. After I had tried the cooked quinoa and the cooked grains and tried a more vegan approach, I also tried using like Sun Warrior, which is a high quality vegan protein powder for like a plant-based protein source.
Okay, so you did try, you thought, okay, maybe there is a plant-based solution to my problems, and you tried that first, and then when you found out, okay, no, this really isn't working, I really need to try the meat.
Because I literally couldn't function. I literally couldn't, it wasn't just a matter of then getting by on that kind of vegan setup. It was, I couldn't function day in, day out when I introduced those foods. Because I had such severe GI stress. And there was also a point before this diagnosis that I went to get an x-ray of my colon because I was in such distress, just such severe GI distress. I was having mixed symptoms of IBS, so I'd go between like diarrhea and constipation, and eating fully raw vegan, just fruits and vegetables. And it showed, the x-ray showed severe intestinal impaction.
Wow.
So you can imagine the irony. I mean, vegans say that meat rots in the colon.
Yeah, they keep telling us, eat more vegetables, then you can poop better.
Yes,
right?
Yeah.
More vegetables.
More fiber.
You need fiber, that's what makes for great and regular bowel movements. And here you've been eating you had been eating for 8 or 9 years, only nothing else but fiber, right?
Yeah.
And you have impaction on the x-rays. Wow.
Yeah, I had impaction, and it was just peristalsis basically wasn't working. And for me, it was just because of the severe nutrient deficiencies by that time, because I really distinguish between short-term and long-term. I think short-term you can get away with it a lot. The first 2 years, I felt fine. It was really after that I started degrading, and especially when I went more fruit-based, I think the degeneration rapidly occurs, just because you don't have the DHA. You just have, it's just...
Yes, I think this is also what one can read on and see on the YouTube videos over and over again, that raw vegans or cooked vegans, they can last for quite some time, and especially when they cheat from time to time, right? That they can go on for some time. But the fruitarians, I mean, this is like complete like suicide. And
it's another level.
It's another level, and they lose teeth, and it's like especially what it does with teeth is like tremendous. And you have to imagine, like, the brain needs fat, right, to function properly. And if you eat just fruit, where's the fat, right? So
but the issue is that you can't win, because the whole reason, so the premise that Doug Graham set up 80-10-10 with those kind of macronutrient ratios is that when you have a fruit-based diet, if you do also high fat and high sugar, because there aren't many protein foods in the plant world, in the natural plant world, especially as a fruitarian. So you're either going to be eating high carbohydrate or high fat. And combining those can be even worse for insulin resistance.
Right.
So, and so I would experience that. I would have like avocado, I would crave fats and have like avocado, but then I would feel awful because it was combined with the sugar. And then that led me to believe, right, no, I only need to have low fat, higher sugar. And you feel better than having a high fat and high sugar, but in the long term, you're just missing such crucial nutrients. So you just can't win either way. You're going to be missing out.
So this 10% in protein that this guy suggests, so those are what, lentils and beans and such, or
no, greens. Just
greens also, okay.
Yes.
Like what?
Yes. Like heads of romaine lettuce, like half a kilo of spinach, cucumbers, zucchini. I mean, what they call protein is a bit laughable because none of them have that complete protein profile anyway.
Yeah.
So this is it. It's like beyond the macronutrients, and it's also beyond, like, if I plug into Chronometer everything I was eating on a vegan diet, even if it hits all of those like RDAs, one, it doesn't mean my body's absorbing it, and two, it doesn't mean that it's in the active form that I need. And it's because of that poor conversion rate. Like carotenoids to retinol is such a poor conversion, and many things can also inhibit that conversion, such as having GI distress, which I had from the vegan diet. So you get yourself into this situation where you're not converting the nutrients you need, and you're not eating the active form of the nutrients. The same with ALA to DHA and EPA. For brain development and methylation and all of these important things.
Yeah, I think a great example is also spinach and calcium, and this is something that Sally Norton, she's an oxalate researcher, talked about, that basically in every one of those lists that lists like calcium-rich foods, spinach is one of the top foods, right? But what we know by now is that the calcium in spinach is really, for humans, is not absorbable because it's because of the high oxalate content of spinach. So the calcium actually gets bound to the oxalates, and we can't really absorb it at all, right? And so we already know this, and yet still spinach is still listed as high calcium food in many of those lists. So
almonds too.
Almonds the same, right? Yeah, almonds. Yeah, all nuts are also like oxalate bombs. So yeah, there's so much misinformation and such a misconception about nutrients and what we can absorb and.
And it's the synergy too, and it's the interaction with our own biochemistry that we kind of forget, because, and I think that's the danger, because again, you can put everything in Chronometer and you can be like, you can get a golden star because you hit all of the RDAs, but it doesn't take into account the oxalates, the phytic acid, all of these problematic compounds that can inhibit the absorption of the other nutrients that we're trying to get.
Right. Wait a minute. Chronometer, I'm not even familiar. Is this like a website that lists like the nutrients of foods?
Yeah, so you can just put in your daily intake, and it gives you your nutrient intake.
I see.
It's a bit like MyFitnessPal. It's like one of those.
I see. Okay, so then you start eating eggs, sardines, and what did you say? Shrimp?
Yes, scallop and seafood.
Right. Okay, and what happened then?
Yes. So that was about 5 years ago. Good things happened, but also my issues perpetuated. So I was diagnosed with the Graves, then I introduced animal foods. It helped stabilize my health, and it helped stop the decline. But I was still very heavy on the plant food, and I was still having these vegan biases where I would go more towards that side. So I was still eating a lot of vegetables, nuts, and seeds, which were actually causing big issues that I didn't realize until I cut them out. So introducing the animal foods was a good step, but it wasn't sufficient in really restoring my health, because I still had those immunological triggers, and I was still going up and down. So I managed to get into remission with an autoimmune paleo protocol. So I cut out eggs, I cut out nightshades, of course, any nuts and seeds and legumes. I wasn't eating grains at that point anyway. And I managed to get my Graves' disease into clinical remission, which was amazing for me because completely without medication.
So clinical remission meaning you had no symptoms?
No, my blood work.
Your blood work was perfect, but you didn't have
everything
symptoms.
in range. But I was still struggling with my health.
Okay.
So, of course, I wasn't at the worst level that I was with Graves, so with Graves, I got insomnia, my hair was thinning, I had tachycardia, which is extremely high heart rate, above 100 beats per minute, and chronic anxiety. I just got anxiety because everything is like sped up, basically. Right. So that kind of leveled down, of course, with my T3 and T4 getting into range, so all of my thyroid hormones got into range. But I was still really struggling with digestion. I would still wake up with fatigue. I would still have joint pain and just random flare-ups. Like I would eat a food that I thought I would do fine with, and then it would just be very random where I would react badly to it. And so that continued, and I kept trying to tweak my diet. And then over time, I just realized the higher proportion of plant foods, the worse I felt, and the higher proportion of animal foods, the better I felt.
So hold on a second. So let's stop for a minute. So at that point, you were still very heavy on the plant foods, and you were doing the animal products more as a side dish or as in a supplemental form. Would that be correct to say?
Yeah, I was trying to really base my diet still on plants.
Right.
And then the thing is that when I introduced animal foods, my body craved them so much, I would then go through periods of needing or eating big quantities of animal foods. And on one hand, I actually felt better, which I was like, how? I really didn't want to believe it. Right. But then on the other hand, I would still mix it up with high volume of plant foods, which still gave me issues. So I was just stuck in these two worlds.
Right.
I really wanted to be more plant-based, but my body really wanted more animal foods. And I was just stuck. And I was trying to go between them both, and it just wasn't working. And at that time, I didn't have any idea about a carnivore diet. And it was just me trying to figure out my body's signals and reducing fiber. The days that I reduced fiber, I would feel so much better. But then I would always go back because I thought we needed plants. And I was eating a lot of greens and juicing my greens and doing more like, a paleo approach, I would say. And then got into keto, more keto style. But then when I would swap my fats, my animal fats for coconut and avocado, I would then get inflammation back. I would just get issues again. So it wasn't just even the macronutrient ranges for me. It was really the plant foods, whatever was in those plants, the compounds, really messed up my immune system.
So it wasn't just important that you had enough fat, but that the fat was also animal-based.
Yeah.
Right. I think that, this is also an important point, because many people think saturated fat is good. Okay, I got that. So let me just, get me that coconut oil, right? And that fixes that. But it turns out, no, you can't really substitute animal fat. That there is nothing that's better than that, right?
And the issue, I think, is especially someone who has intestinal permeability, so anyone with autoimmune issues, it's just that every single plant food has some potential problematic compound in it. Right. And you just can't get away from that.
Right. Either it's lactans, oxalates, salicylates, something. There's something that, or too much fiber or carbs, there's always something.
There's always something that can just tip over that threshold and cause an immunological response.
Right.
And that's what I was getting, and that's what inhibited further healing for me. because I got into clinical remission, but then my health wasn't restored. My gut lining wasn't completely normalized. And in fact, it led to, so I'll try and make it simple, but it led to a second relapse with Graves' disease. So 2 years later, I then had a relapse clinically with Graves' disease. So I got an autoimmune response again. And at that time, I was going through a stressful time, but then I was also trying to be more plant-based again. So that's me just going back and forth. And with the relapse, what was interesting is that how I got into remission for the second time is I did a 30-day raw milk fast.
Okay.
So nothing but raw milk. And within those 30 days, I got into remission faster than someone on medication. That's what my doctor said.
Wow.
So it was really interesting to me. So finally, I think I just started connecting the dots and piecing things together in a way that worked for me. And after that, I really stuck to mostly animal foods and still having some greens until I came across Dr. Shawn Baker and the carnivore diet, and for me it just made complete sense. I was like, oh, why didn't I think of this before? So, yeah.
When was that?
So that was 13 months ago.
13 months ago, okay. And from then on, you went full-on carnivore, yes?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
From then I completely cut out any of the plant foods. So I also found paleomedicina.
Yeah.
So the research group out of Hungary that treats autoimmune conditions with a fully carnivorous diet. Of course, they call it kind of PKD, Paleolithic ketogenic diet.
Mm-hmm.
And they have very precise macro nutrient ratios and nose to tail and organ meat and animal fat. And I actually do more their style. So I eat nose to tail carnivore, because I really think, again, talking about traditional diets, they always paired muscle meat with organ meat and connective tissue and the whole animal. So for me, meat means the whole animal. So I do try to eat a more whole animal approach.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, for dinner right now, I have beef cheek and I have leftover tongue also. So all of these organ meat.
Beef cheek, this.
Yeah, cheek,
okay.
Yeah.
I never heard about it. Okay, I heard about tripe. I heard about tongue. I actually love tongue.
It's
but
so good.
Beef cheek. Okay, is this fatty or?
Yes, it's fatty and really gelatinous. It's delicious. It's really, really good.
Okay. All right. So walk us through this. So first of all, how many meals per day do you eat?
So on average, I eat about 2 meals a day.
Okay.
Sometimes 1 and sometimes 3. It just depends on my training. It depends on what I'm trying to, if I'm doing a bit more intermittent fasting or not. But I try not to force fasting. I like a more intuitive approach.
Mm-hmm.
And generally, anyway, naturally, I fast around 15 hours. So I eat usually my first meal around 11 or 1, and then I'll have a second meal between 6 and 8 or something.
Okay. And so how much meat do you eat per day on average?
Yeah. So it can vary from 1 to 3 kilos.
Okay, 1 to 3 kilos, that's between 2 and 6 pounds. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, 3 kilos, that's a lot. Wow.
That's I know. But at the moment I'm training for a Spartan race. So
sorry,
it really...
What race?
I'm training for a Spartan race, so it's an obstacle course.
Okay.
Yeah, so it just means
so you're burning
I'm training a lot.
You're burning a lot of calories. So you need it, okay. All right, and so head to tail to head, or what's it called? So I read this one article, and they said that one thing that you prefer was brain. Is this true?
I've had brain twice. It is very delicious, but unfortunately it's not a staple. I can't find it very often because they're not allowed to sell it here.
Right, because
but I can order it specially from my butcher.
Right, because of the mad cow disease, because of the history of mad cow disease in the 90s, I think it was, yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
Exactly. Except, of course, yeah, so it's more to do with the production methods that make it unsafe to eat. But sourcing high quality animal products is quite important to me. I source everything from like a local organic butcher, my farmer's market where I'm in contact with a local farmer, and there's also another biodynamic organic farm very close to me where I get my other meat. So I'm quite lucky here. I'm in Holland at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
There are some really nice sources where I can get really good quality animal products.
Nice. So what are your favorite organs besides brain from time to time?
I would say tongue is really good.
Uh-huh.
The tongue is probably at the top, and also it's really hard to pick a favorite. I really like oxtail.
Uh-huh.
Just any cut which is full of connective tissue and collagen, because then when you slow cook it, it becomes really like gelatinous, and it has a lot of flavor. And I found that when I really concentrate on the more like collagen-rich meat cuts, my skin is much better, my hair and nails too, which of course makes sense because collagen is just an important nutrient for that.
And go ahead.
Oh, the last thing is just liver. I often have liver is the most common one I have. Just chicken liver is my favorite.
Oh yeah, chicken liver is nice. Yeah, beef liver is a little more strong in the flavor, but it's nice too. Yeah.
I have to admit I generally have just chicken liver because beef liver it's a bit more strong.
So what's the animal that you eat the most of?
So I would say the base of my diet is really like ruminant animals, so beef and lamb. And I feel best with that, and I think it's just the red meat is just such a perfect food, especially for the nutrient requirements of females. You know, the one symptom I forgot to mention was that I had amenorrhea, so I lost my period, my cycle, during the whole time I was vegan, and then it came back very irregularly when I reintroduced animal foods, and now since after 7 months of carnivore, it's come back and it has been the most stable it has ever been, which is completely regular.
So what do you think about that? So in the vegan world, I believe, I'm not hanging out there much, but I believe that, this is not uncommon that women lose their periods. And then some of them, I think, explain it away as like, menstruation, that's really just, women getting rid of toxins. And when you get rid of the period, that means that your body doesn't have any toxins anymore. So it's a good thing. That means, hey, you're all purified and you're about to ascend and become like, I don't know, some holy being, some transcendental, I don't know, something, right? So what do you think about that? And have you heard those type of explanations in the?
Oh, that's precisely what the response I got when I would post about my amenorrhea. They turn everything on its head. So whatever is common in the vegan world, suddenly it has to be a good thing.
Right.
Even though
hair falling out, that's great. That's just toxins.
It's detox. You'll grow back even better. Maybe it will just take 20 years or until after you're dead and gone, but that's alright.
Right.
I mean, it really is, it is quite amazing. Now I'm outside because I think you can't see the label once you're in the jar. So when I was vegan, I could not see the insanity of it. Like, I was like, yes, of course, oh my god, I'm detoxing. It makes so much sense. Although that's not necessarily what I told myself. I would just accept it. It would just become an accepted part of the experience of being vegan, and the beliefs really do get in the way, and you don't look at these objective measures. I mean, menstruation is so important for bone mass density long term, and just a general indicator of health, and your body communicating to you that it feels safe to actually reproduce, and for fertility.
Exactly.
And and so for me, losing my period, it was really about my body trying to tell me that I'm not in a safe place. I'm lacking all these essential nutrients. How do you want me to, bring a baby into this world if you don't even have enough DHA for your own brain?
Right. I think it's just a sign that of lost fertility, right? It's like the same when a vegan man reports that they can't maintain an erection, or that the erection is not as good as it used to be, right? It's just a sign that this part of your body isn't working properly anymore, and that most likely your fertility, your ability to procreate isn't working anymore, right?
Yeah, so, and I think like the endocrine system is in such close connection also with the nervous system and the immune system, and I think so when something's off in one system, it affects all of the systems, and I really view the body as like a system of systems,
right.
In a holistic way. So, and when there's such big dysregulation in one system, I think that stress on the body is just. I mean, of course you would want to shut down reproductive function. You're not going to think about reproducing in a time of stress.
Right. Yeah, the body just switches over just to survival mode. Like anything else is just shut down, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing that, just one thing I forgot to mention, because I also tried just so many different therapies when I was vegan and going through my health issues. I tried hydrocolonic therapy.
Mm-hmm.
I tried, and I would actually go through multiple series, and it would give relief, but not enough. And also, the therapist would also be really surprised how impacted my colon was. And they would say, you just need to eat more fiber and more vegetables. And when I would say I was vegan, they were just so perplexed. They were just, but you're on the healthiest diet. How can you be like this? And so for me, I mean, just that was so distressful, and I think it just feeds into this whole thing. So when you get into veganism, you have health issues, your beliefs are really strong, your body starts breaking down, but you don't want to believe it. But then it becomes very distressful to wake up with these symptoms like every single day, and you just kind of turn it off.
Yeah.
So there's this kind of just psychological downward spiral also. Right. So I had a real like identity crisis when I had to stop being vegan, and so it's not just the diet, it's what it does to your psychology also. Right. And I think that's where the danger is also for young people who haven't developed these like critical thinking skills or aren't rooted in evolutionary biology or anthropology, where we can see historically what our diet was made of. And actually the traditional natural foods are the most nutrient dense animal foods.
Right, exactly. It was interesting what you said, that when you started eating the animal foods, that you could feel that it was good for you, for your body, and yet your mindset didn't allow you to really see that and accept that, and you kept going back to the plants food, the plants based diet, right? And I was going through something similar. This is like already, I think, around 10 years ago, when I stumbled upon the paleo diet, and I had no idea that it had a name and that's what it was. I just through trial and error, I figured out that I did best on just meat and vegetables. But by that time, I was so indoctrinated, and I was so absolutely convinced that meat causes cancer, that I thought, okay, it's just a matter of months until I develop a tumor or just get diagnosed with cancer, because I thought this is like impossible, that this is a healthy way of eating. And I was literally like every one of my meals was meat and vegetables, like meat and, for example, a salad, right? And I was feeling great. I had energy. I was clear in my head. I loved it, right? And yet I was like, no, it's no way that this is healthy. And yet my health was just thriving, right? Yeah. So I can totally understand. It's like the indoctrination is crazy. So go ahead.
Oh, well, I think it's just we've come to assume just like vegetables have to be the greatest thing ever. And even outside of the vegan community, I mean, if I go to my doctor and say I'm feeling amazing right now, he'll say that no, but your diet is awful, you can't feel that good. And it is this like disconnect. And I think it comes down to this like disconnected mentality we have. We're just so disconnected to our food and where it comes from and how it's produced, and also just what it means to feel good. And we normalize fatigue, we normalize joint pain, we normalize feeling unwell. So how can we know that we can't feel better? And I think it's like this normalization, even within the vegan community, long term, definitely, but also outside of it. And we see veganism as this extreme kind of alternative, but also carnivore as this extreme alternative. And then in the middle, there's somewhere this thing that we call normal. But what if our reference point is just completely off?
Right, exactly. Right, because I mean, is it normal to be able to eat, a sugar bomb like a piece of chocolate cake and have no health repercussions after that? Like, is this normal? How do we know? Why do we assume that? Right? Like, is it normal to eat those? I don't even know like what they're called in English, but like kids eat those like gelatinous like stuff that's like has bright colors, and it's like
radioactive
stuff like that, and children, school children, they grow up on stuff like this, or on Coke and Pepsi, right? I mean, why do we assume that it's supposed to be normal to eat those foods and remain healthy, right? Like it just doesn't make any sense.
And also basing like our whole, not only diet, but food production on the one macronutrient we don't essentially need, which is carbohydrates.
Right.
I mean, we have essential fatty acids, we have essential amino acids, but we have no essential need for carbohydrates, for dietary carbohydrates.
Right.
And so, that perspective, and I don't fear carbohydrates. I don't think it helps either to demonize any food. I don't take that stance either. But it's more about just understanding what these foods do to us, so we can turn over that ratio. Because if our diet is based on the one macronutrient that we don't need, that makes no sense.
Right. It's just exactly. Yeah. No, I'm not. I've been a carnivore for a year now, and I by no means do I say like everyone has to become a carnivore. Like I really don't care what people eat. I don't even care about what vegans eat. If somebody decides to eat old car tires, and they think that's the healthiest thing they can do, all power to you. I don't even care, But the problem becomes when you start to enforce your views online and want to restrict meat and want to tax meat and want to tell me that I have to eat the way you eat, So then you're, it's just like, then I'm going to fight you with everything I got, because this is a direct threat to my health. And so that's why I'm planning to do more videos like this one to really educate people about the dangers of veganism. So, okay, so you've been now a carnivore for 13 months, yes?
Yes.
So you've only been eating animal foods, animal products, meat, and some fish, probably also, right?
Fish and eggs also.
Okay.
Even like goose eggs I've been getting from the market, which would be really nice.
Right.
And oily fish, so nose to tail meat from ruminant animals, seafood also, so just seasonally though, so like when oysters are in season, I'll have oysters. I love oysters.
Okay. Do you cook them or you eat them raw?
No, I just have them raw, yeah.
Okay. All right. So what happened to your Graves' disease in that time and your symptoms and all the other inflictions you had when you were vegan?
When I was vegan?
What happened to your health, to your symptoms, like now? Like, how do you feel now after 13 months of being carnivore?
Right. So I just feel the most balanced I've ever felt, and I'm in the most stable position with my health. So, and that was the difference for me, because just introducing meat wasn't enough. It was really also eliminating vegetables and the plant matter that made the biggest difference. So it had to be like a double-edged approach. It was, removing what was triggering immunological responses and taking away from like detoxification processes, just because my body didn't tolerate them, which was the plant foods, and then also adding in the nourishing foods and things that upregulate detoxification pathways and are anti-inflammatory, and that was the nose to tail animal foods. And I just feel I'm not completely against ever. I don't have a moral thing against having vegetables or anything. I just don't have any need or any craving for them. And pretty much all of my symptoms have gotten better and stabilized. So it would be really interesting. I'm going to have blood tests again this summer when I'm back home in Geneva. But last summer, after about 5 months of carnivore, I had blood test results too, and they were the best I've ever had also. So even objectively, I can see my health improving.
Okay, so basically all your blood numbers, everything has normalized, yes?
Yeah, completely.
5 months after eating nothing but meat and animal products.
Yes, and in big quantities, because at that time too I was training, and so I really enjoy resistance training, so I like building muscle. I also think muscle is, like an organ of longevity, and it increases your metabolic rate, and it really provides good benefits for metabolic health. So that's been another piece to my puzzle, is also like focusing on resistance training,
right,
and getting stronger. And I mean, I think just eating meat, it just complements it so well. And I think any of the issues around like mTOR activation or like being too anabolic, it's kind of offset, because for me at least, and what I see with a lot of people in the carnivore community, we have this kind of natural fasting cycle too. So I'll fast, at least 15 hours within the day, and that really is like a nice counterbalance. And so you get those kind of the fasting benefits, but then also the feasting benefits of then feasting on really nutrient-dense foods. And I think that is really, it's really important, and it's kind of like this natural rhythmic approach to it.
Yeah. Now, do you take any supplements?
Unless you count liver as a supplement. I think liver is like the best supplement you can take. Okay. But no, I don't take any synthetic supplements. The only thing I add sometimes is seaweed salt, so that's for iodine. So if I'm not having a lot of like seafood or fish, then I'll add some seaweed, or maybe sometimes I put like a strip of seaweed in the bone broth I make, just for the iodine.
I see.
So I think that's one thing that can be lowered in just like land animals.
Right. Now, what do you say to those people who hear, okay, that you went from vegan, so eating only plants, to now to eating only meat, and so they're like, but why from one extreme to the other? Can there not be a middle ground? What do you say to those people?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's such a great question, because it can, on the outside, it can just seem like they're two extremes of the spectrum, but I don't see it like that at all. I don't think the opposite of veganism is carnivore. Veganism to me is like this, it's a dogma, and it's also a completely unnatural diet. So if I'm looking at a spectrum of a natural human diet, veganism isn't even a part of it, but there's carnivore on one side, and then there's more and more plant foods. And if I wanted to add more plant foods, I would be very specific. For me, I'm not strict carnivore. I say I'm specific. So it's foods that I do well with, and they just happen to all be animal foods. And sometimes, I still drink some coffee. So, and I guess in the carnivore kind of community, that's accepted generally anyway as a plant extract. And also mushrooms is another grey area where it's more of fungi. I don't personally eat them, but maybe I'll experiment with them. I'm not sure. So I keep an open mind. And I think that's why, for me, it's not switching from one extreme to the next.
Yeah,
especially because...
I think this also shows the total difference between veganism and carnivore. Like, you're not gonna get hate mail or people disavowing you in the carnivore community because now you came out that you drink coffee or that you eat mushrooms. Like, right? I mean, who cares if you do well with this?
It's about supporting what is good for you and finding what works for you.
Yeah.
And I think a pure strict carnivore diet, meaning no plant foods whatsoever, is a very valuable tool to use, like, as a therapeutic intervention. Like, and this, I really wish when I first got diagnosed with Graves that I knew about it as a tool that I could use, because it would have saved those 4 years of me going back and forth, relapsing with Graves' disease, not spending time with my family because I was sick. I had to miss so many days of, just days that I could have spent with friends and family and working on what I'm passionate about. But I was sick during those 4 years also because I was trying to figure out what works for me. Right. And I still had these kind of biases in my head. And so if I knew of carnivore as a tool I could use, what I realize now, it could have given me a blank slate that I could have then started from again to find what works for me. So it doesn't have to be a long-term lifestyle. Like, it's not like saying go carnivore or go vegan. It's more, okay, carnivore is an amazing tool. For some people it can become more like a lifestyle, and I think especially for those with maybe who have had severe autoimmune issues or metabolic issues in the past, who really don't tolerate plants.
Yeah.
But then for other people who just are interested in it and maybe want to see if they can reach a new level of health, I think it can be a great intervention, and also just as an ultimate elimination diet that you can try, because you're really not giving yourself any of those immune triggers, and then you can build up, and then you can test one food at a time and really see what works for you. Mm-hmm. So I don't see it as like these extremes, and I don't see it as a dogmatic approach. For me, it's more descriptive of my diet rather than prescriptive, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I'm not prescribing myself, this is the way I'm going to eat forever. And in fact, I'm quite open. There's multiple ways you can do it, including like seasonal carnivore, where you're completely carnivore in winter, which makes sense kind of evolutionarily, because those are the only foods we have available. And then in summer, maybe you include some plant foods that you tolerate. I mean, there's many different ways you can adapt it too.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. So, did it happen to you that when you were, for example, at the butchers or butchers, I don't even know how you pronounce this correctly, or at the supermarket, and were buying all that meat, that you got some stupid comments or someone harassing you or saying something? Why do you ruin the planet with all the meat that you're buying, or something like that? Or it never happened?
I've never gotten offensive comments in real life. Okay. I think the online life is very interesting because people don't have that kind of that barrier to stop themselves from being really quite rude sometimes. So I've gotten the worst comments online, but in real life I've only gotten curious looks. And my butcher, I'm in such great terms with my butcher. I mean, I go in there, a few times a week, and we just laugh, and we have such a fun time. And they know I only eat animal products, and they're like, and they tell everyone about it. Actually, she's like, she can lift 140 kilos, and she eats all of this meat. And I just love it. I'm just like, it's so much fun.
Well, wait a minute, you can lift 140 kilos? Wow.
Deadlift. That's like my PR.
Wow. Okay, another question. Okay, you said at the beginning that the main reason, or was it the only reason why you became vegan, was because of ethical concerns, right? So how do you reconcile this now with eating meat? Do you still have those concerns, or?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think if I've gotten backlash from my vegan friends who are still vegan, it's more like, oh, so you've lost all of your compassion for animals and you've just given up on all of your values. Because that's the assumption, is, okay, you go back to meat, it means that you've become, you're going to McDonald's and you don't care about your food and you don't care about animal treatment. And on the other hand, I feel that my values have only gotten stronger, and I'm actually, ironically, supporting them more than before. So how I view it is that when I was vegan, it was more like this fairy tale where I thought I was contributing to saving the planet and my health and the animals, whereas it was really just based on like these partial truths. And when you really look at it in a nuanced way, veganism does very little to help any of those causes, and in fact can do the opposite.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And so how I reconcile it now is, one, I've gotten more informed. Two, I've letting go of the biases I have, so I can actually look at other sides. So I try and take a more holistic perspective, and I see the whole picture rather than just these like nitpicked, kind of cherry-picked
arguments,
data and arguments, exactly. And for me, so for the environmental side, it's more looking towards, yes, okay, animal production. I'm not for industrial factory farming, and I do think there are very big consequences to that, but it's part of a bigger systemic issue that doesn't just include the animal agriculture, but also the crop production. And so when you look at it like that, it's more a systemic issue rather than just isolated to animal agriculture. So that's why I really support like local farms around this area who are practicing regenerative farming or biodynamic farming. And for the ethical side, I mean, you can't get away from the fact that the cycle of life and death is part of this reality, part of this experience. And I think we kind of want to avoid that when we're vegan and step out of that cycle of life. And I know that in the vegan narrative, it's framed as killing an animal for food is unnecessary. But once you realize you actually do need and require animal products for your own health, it changes the whole narrative, because then it actually is necessary. But once we accept that, we can take that responsibility and do it properly.
Right.
Which and for me, that's the big difference between someone who is not vegan, but also maybe slightly ignorant about how they're sourcing their food. Where then vegans can criticize, oh, it's just mindless consumption. But you can also be a conscious carnivore, and you can be contributing to supporting regeneration of the land and regeneration of health through eating meat. And it really has to do with the different methods of production and what you support. So it's just so much more nuanced. And I mean, I study kind of agroecology on the side, and also the dynamics of the food system and the transition towards sustainability. And if there's one thing, it's that it's really complex. Right. And there is no one solution. Like, just going vegan, it can have, the law of unintended consequences is very strong when you just apply that kind of universal law to something so complex, because it's just not the way it works.
Right. Yeah, I don't know whether you're familiar with the work of Alan Savory. You are, right. So he does incredible work, and he shows that you can regenerate soil and regenerate entire landscapes and really turn them from like brown, arid, nearly desert-like landscapes to lush green, with trees and like beautiful, beautiful, healthy, regenerated soil. And the way you do it, and the best way and the most sustainable, most natural way to do it, is through animal farming. And this makes just so much sense, right? And now the vegans say, let's get rid of the cows. Well, okay, I worked at farms, by the way, and I know that in order to grow vegetables, like the most precious thing you have on a farm, that's compost. So basically, the poop of animals, right, and plants leftovers, and you make basically new rich soil out of that. And really nothing is more precious than animal poop as fertilizer. Like nothing beats that, right? And so when you cut that out, like you can't regenerate soil, really. You can't grow anything either, right? But also what you said is, I think Sean Baker makes also the argument that if you really care about animal lives, and if you want to kill as few animals as possible, then the most logical thing would be to actually become a carnivore. Because if you kill just one cow, and if you actually do what you're doing, that you eat it from head to tail, then one human being can live off a cow for a huge chunk of a year, right? And
with complete nutrition.
Right, exactly, and that's just one animal life that had to be sacrificed for that, right? Whereas when you have agriculture, there's so many animal lives that get killed, all the little mice and the worms and the millions of insects that get killed by the pesticides and all the other little critters that get killed by the machinery, right?
And the loss of biodiversity.
Right,
that went into having the monocrop of grain.
Yeah, if you look at monocrops and like huge fields of agriculture, I mean, this is just like this really looks kind of like a desert. There's no diversity.
And not all land is arable, and I think that's the important thing too. I mean, it's not like we can just take all of the land that animals are now roaming on and just turn it into arable land that we're planting crops. It's just not possible. Not all land is arable. It has to be maintained by ruminant animals.
Right.
So the argument, I mean, just in its entirety is so flawed. But that's a product of black and white thinking. Because of course, we also don't need to produce crops in a monoculture way. That's also a product of this kind of industrial production. We can also have integrated systems where they resemble and mimic more natural systems that have animal and plants interacting in one system.
Yeah.
That's more like the principles of agroecology, and it improves the biodiversity and it improves the fertility of the soil. And like you say, I mean, it's the soil that is so important. If you have to focus on one thing, it's let's save the soil. And that just requires, like Alan Savory says, it's the management of livestock that is important.
Yeah.
And I mean, he puts forth the argument that it's the only way we can reverse desertification.
Yeah.
And then stop global warming. So I mean, so when we see everything, there's never just this one solution either, though. It's really just much more nuanced, and animal foods definitely aren't kind of this eco-terrorism that would be led to believe.
Right.
Although we do see, I think what the vegan community does very well is take the extremes of animal agriculture, the industrial animal agriculture, and promote it as if it's the only way that it can ever be done. And of course, there are consequences to industrial animal agriculture. But again, it doesn't mean that we don't need to eat meat. It means we need to change the system.
Right. What I think also is, I also don't want animals to suffer more than absolutely necessary. And I think that some of the images coming from the industrial animal farms are absolutely horrific. But I also think that this is a very, very tiny percentage.
Mm-hmm.
And that they isolate those, and then cut them together, make a documentary, and make it look as if this was an everyday occurrence, and as if this was like a regular thing, that this is how animals in industrial farms are raised. Whereas I think it's probably much more correct to say that, those are just the exceptions, right?
Yeah, they are completely, and that's what magnifies it.
Right.
And especially with the documentaries, I mean, they spread like wildfire.
Right.
And then when it's the only thing presented, and especially when you are someone who lives in a city, is not connected to maybe agriculture or how food is grown, and then we see these images and we just take it as truth because we're just so disconnected from that that system and from just the whole chain, the whole life and death cycle as well.
Yeah. So what do you think about parents who raise their children vegan, and what do you think about, there are certain societies, like I think there's a British dietary association or something, and there's a whole sort of like organizations who say that it's absolutely fine to feed vegan diets to all humans, from children to adults, and that they provide a full nutritional, that's perfectly fine, and that you will not become malnourished. What do you think about that?
Well, I will start with saying I'm not against anyone who makes an informed choice to go vegan or just eat plant-based. I'm not against choice. I'm pro-choice. But the issue for the children, I think, just very similar with my situation when I was 13, I didn't have those critical thinking skills. I wasn't making an informed choice. I thought I was, but I really wasn't. And also just physiologically, when you're still in the developmental stages, you still need DHA, you still need EPA, you still need all of these nutrients that you simply cannot get from plant sources. I mean, unless you really take supplements. But then my question is, like, it completely goes against what you're trying to achieve. If you're trying to achieve a natural, optimal diet with the least environmental impact, then synthetic supplements and then having to have foods shipped from all over the world to make up a balanced vegan diet goes completely against the thing that you're trying to achieve. So why do that in the first place?
Right.
And like we were saying, you could have local grass-fed meat or grass-finished meat, and fulfill all of those goals while getting complete nutrition. And I think with children, if anything, I think there should be like this cutoff where you need to be at least 20 or 25 to then choose to go vegan, because just in those developmental stages, it's so important for the brain to get those essential fatty acids and to get the complete amino acids needed for neurotransmission and for detoxification processes. And it's not just the absence or lack, but it's also the ratios. And the ratios are in perfect, they come in the perfect form in the animal food. And you just have to juggle and get everything precisely right when you're doing a vegan diet. And I think maybe 1% of vegans may do that, where they can really get off with the negative health effects of not doing it right, within the framework that we can assume that there is a right way to do it.
Now, do you wish that when you were 13 that your parents had stomped down and said, "No, you're not gonna do this vegan nonsense. As long as you're under my roof, you will eat meat," or something?
Well, they did try and do that, but I was so hard-headed. I wish, in a way, I think everything that happened to me happened for a reason, and I don't wish it happened any other way. I just don't want it to happen to anyone else, because it wasn't fun. But it did teach me a lot. And even just going through illness taught me a lot about the human body, about psychology, about how the real world works, and it's not all about this vegan fairy tale. And I think my issue is that I knew that I didn't want to contribute to the mainstream dominant regime, meaning I didn't want to buy into industrial farming. I saw that things were wrong with the healthcare system, with farming practices. So for me, it was about making a choice to change or try and be a force for change. Veganism just happened to be that avenue, and unfortunately, one that was very detrimental to health. But I do think we do have a broken food system. We do have a broken healthcare system. There are consequences. There is an epidemic of chronic disease going on. So there are things we need to change, and there are alternatives we need to put forth. And we do need to think about systemic change. But we do need a more nuanced approach and a more holistic approach, rather than just like this dogmatic black and white. So I think if I hadn't changed to vegan, it wouldn't have opened my mind to just being more, having a larger perspective, and just waking up to, I guess the need we do have as humanity to make certain choices now to have a better path for our future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that whatever conscious decision an adult makes, I really don't care if you decide to eat your shoelaces. It's your problem. I really couldn't care less. But I think that parents who feed their children a vegan diet, I'm really absolutely militantly opposed to it, and I think this should be against the law, and I think parents who do this, they should be somehow legally persecuted. I think this is absolute child abuse and should be made illegal. And there's actually so many reports of children having died who were fed a vegan diet, and even children who were receiving milk from their mother, but the mother was vegan. Right? So even those children showed malnutrition because, although it was milk, so you'd say it's an animal product, right? But it didn't have enough B12 because the mother didn't have B12, right? So I think this is absolutely a horrendous thing. But yeah, as an adult, do whatever you want, I don't care. But for children, I think this should be outlawed, absolutely. And there was actually a proposition like this in Italy. There was an Italian politician who wanted to outlaw it, but I don't think it passed. But they had in Italy, they had a few cases where vegan children died.
And to be honest, it's all for this dogma. It's all for this ideology. And, that's what makes me really sad, because I think if we just realize that, yes, we can, not support what we don't want to support, which is maybe whatever, the industrial agricultural system or chronic disease, but we do it in a way that can support our health, and it doesn't have to be this dogmatic ideology. And I think that's what really separates veganism from all of these other diets, and what makes it really dangerous, I think, is and mothers raising their children on a vegan diet and maybe not considering implications for their long-term neurological health, for their developmental health, for cognitive functions later on. I mean, we know that early childhood nutrition impacts your whole lifespan. It impacts the way you develop throughout your whole life. Even if the person switches to a very nutrient-dense diet when they're 20, you cannot undo the damage done when you're malnourished in your developmental years.
That's true, yeah. There was actually, there is one well-documented case, I'm sure there's more, but there's one that you can find on PubMed. There was a boy who was hospitalized because of severe B12 deficiency because of the veganism of his mother. And he had some neurological deficiencies and also developmental problems. And so they gave him B12 shots, right? And some of the problems could be remedied, and some of them resolved completely, but some remained. So yes, some things can be fixed, but others not. So
I kind of see that with myself. Like, I've managed to really restore my health to a very functional level that I'm very happy and grateful for. But some things, I'm pretty sure I'll never be able to tolerate, a fully omnivorous diet again. I'm pretty sure I'll have to be very specific with which foods I eat. And this is just because my body has gone through what it's gone through. And you can definitely heal. And I think we simultaneously underestimate how much we can heal, but then we overestimate sometimes the body's resilience. So by not being careful in the first place, right, or careful enough. And I think we really need to take this perspective where the body is amazing and it's resilient and it can heal with the right conditions, but let's not abuse it. And I think veganism has got to the point where it is, or could be classified as an abuse to the body,
Yeah.
and especially to a growing child.
Right. All right. So is there anything else that you would like to add? Anything else that you would like to tell your former vegan friends? Or whoever.
Yeah, I would actually. And I think to be a good human, we first have to be a good animal. We forget that we are also an animal, and the whole vegan narrative is also be kind to animals. Well, first be kind to yourself, and I think we need to take this compassion, this circle of compassion, and include ourselves in it, and then go from there. Because once we accept that we need animal products to be optimally healthy, then we can do it the right way, and we can pave the way that we can have a transition to a sustainable, nutrient-dense, and ethical food system that is, it's not vegan, but it fulfills all of those core tenets of, environment, health, and ethics. Yeah, right. That's what I would say.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very
much
for this interview, and I hope this will be helpful to some people.
Yeah, I really hope so, and I think it's such an important conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.